I had a very lonely, sad childhood, and a huge chunk of it is behind a protective barrier. I did have happy moments. I started writing poetry when I was 12. It was a way to express myself when I couldn't talk to anyone. My life started when I met Steve, my future husband, through friends in 1993. I had been on Mellaril for 14 years, diagnosed as having severe depression with psychosis. I lived in a cloud, unable to voice an opinion, make decisions for myself. I lived with my mum and had no self-esteem. I did my work very well, but after that I was on autopilot. There was a vacuum. Steve said he always saw huge potential. I was a challenge. He didn't bank on falling in love with me. He showed me how to live, have fun, take risks by speaking to people and to understand what life was about. And he gave me unconditional love. He showed me basic living skills, important emotional intelligence, problem-solving skills that I was meant to learn from my loving parents. My stepfather, Rob, was my real father. He was loving and gentle. We married in 1995 in a low-key ceremony, which everyone really enjoyed. That year was a breakthrough for me. I was seeing a psychiatrist and everything was fine, but I hadn't mentioned about pop. I was in denial and I wasn't improving. Steve came to see the doctor with me. He said I was lying to the doctor. I gave him such a look of hatred because he had changed what I wanted to believe. Then I started to live. I became more confident, saw a psychologist and started to learn how to deal with the memories from pop with support from Steve. I made a decision to go off the Mellaril, cold turkey, without telling anyone and had a bad reaction. It was a struggle, but Meg started to thrive. I worked in various nursing homes, but as soon as I became stressed, I left and moved to another job. I enjoyed aged care very much. In 2002, I had breast cancer and had a mastectomy, and chemotherapy induced menopause, which made me sterile, caused hallucinations and depression. That lasted for 15 months. That was a hell of a journey. Steve was my carer, protector and loving husband. He used to lie on the floor because he was afraid I would stab myself night after night. He would not let anyone near me who was negative. Steve could see how upset I was when my hair fell out in clumps. He shaved my head and then I shaved his head. He gave me courage to go out in public with a bald head. In the oncology unit, they always did a double take. They couldn't work out who was having chemo. I recovered and went back to work. Steve's sister Brenda took me shopping for a wig and a makeover. When I walked through the door, Steve didn't recognise me. He said I looked like a Spice Girl. Brenda and Steve's mum were a great support. My mum was in her own way, even through the negative comments. In 2003, Steve developed liver disease, and from that time, I became his carer on and off. Due to him being out of work, looking after me, and because of his age, he was never able to find work commensurate with his experience and intelligence. What a waste. It was disheartening for him to be on the end of age discrimination when employers would not even reply to his CV. It is my firm belief that this contributed to ongoing illnesses. In 2003, post-chemo, I organised a wedding renewal and changed my name to Scott Perrett, New South Wales, to show my love to Steve and to Rob, who meant so much to me. It was a wonderful day, and we even had our short-billed Corella on the shoulder present as a witness. My best friend Alison was there with her family. My father, Rob, died a few months later, and we both felt it was time to move to Queensland for a new start. We were on an ongoing holiday in 2004 when we moved up to Queensland. We settled down and I again worked in aged care. Steve tried looking for work to no avail. 2006 was a milestone for me. I gained my driver's licence after much persuasion and support from Steve. He said he wouldn't drive me anymore. I had to get the licence. I had had a phobia against driving for 30 years after Mum said, oh, you can't do it, or you won't amount to anything. And I took 18 months seeing a hypnotist. It took me 2 years on a learner's permit, and you should have seen the smile on my driving instructor's face. My confidence increased. I started social art classes on Steve's suggestion and really liked it. Steve had worked for 2 years and thrived on it. This dried up, and the age discrimination rose up again when he was applying for work. 2008, Steve was sick and I was working and being his carer as well. 2010, Steve was unwell on and off, and I was finding it difficult working and caring for Steve, finding a good balance. There was financial hardship at times, but we each had each other and loved living in Queensland. I applied for the disability support pension for Steve and carer's allowance for me. The paperwork was horrendous, and as I had a handwriting problem with dystonia, it took me 3 weeks to complete. I asked for help, but there was legal issues to prevent this. The amount of research and evidence needed was heaps. I almost gave up. In 2011, Steve had his right leg amputated, and I didn't know if he was going to survive. I was alone and felt I could not reach out to my mum or brother for help. I didn't tell them until a few months after the amputation. You right?
Yeah.
His sister Deb flew up and supported both of us. This changed both of our lives. It was hard, but we got through this. The staff where I worked were amazing. He learnt to walk with the prosthesis, and I painted a tree as therapy while he was in the rehab unit. 2012, Steve developed diabetes and was in ICU and came through, thankfully. I left the aged care facility where I was working after a very stressful event and worked as an agency nurse, which I enjoyed. 2013, I was driving down to the Tweed and all over to work. One evening, I got a call from Steve. He had fallen out of his wheelchair onto the floor tiles trying to pick something up. I called an ambulance from work and he went to the hospital. He was in a lot of pain and discharged himself from this hospital when he felt they weren't helping him. I took him to another hospital. They x-rayed his right hip and left knee. He had a broken right hip and left knee. A pin was inserted into his right hip and a cast from toes to groin placed on his left leg. As a therapy, I painted his cast with dolphins and his Scottish clan tartan. I did this in hospital, in his hospital room, and he delighted in watching me. The cast was a conversation piece when we went outside. I still have this cast leaning against the garage wall. Within a week, the left leg was gangrenous. He went into hospital again and had a left leg amputation. When he came home, I could not access any community help for Steve or myself. He was under 65 and there was no funding. I asked for help from the agency where I worked, even though it was expensive. That was the only option. I had a week off and went back to work. Steve had his nephew stay with him, which gave me peace of mind. By December, I was still working, trying to be with Steve, and as carer, women and nurses do, wasn't putting me first. I was becoming anxious, walking fast, trying to do everything. We were having financial hardship and difficulty paying off the mortgage and bills. St Vinny's were marvellous, though we were embarrassed to ask for help, even though we barely had food to eat. February 2014, Steve went into hospital and I was working, visiting him every day as well. I had suicidal thoughts late last night and rang Steve. When I didn't answer the phone, he feared the worst and rang the police. I was taken to the psychiatric unit for 3 days and they discharged me once they thought I was okay. I immediately picked Steve up from the hospital and we consoled each other. I made a decision not to work since then. Again, we had financial hardship and mortgage arrears. I sought advice from the Citizens Advice Bureau and St Vinny's. From my point of view, it has taken my own meltdown to access the personal support that I needed, and I accepted that I had depression on and off. Where was the help I needed last year from the government? Too right, I was cynical. 2014 was a year of self-discovery, improvement in my mental health. From the moment I had the tailored help from Partners in Recovery, FSG, all the caseworkers and support workers, psychiatrists and psychologists who spent time with me and guided me through this time. My confidence exploded through self-esteem improvement course through Centre Care and Power On through FSG. I had made a new friend also. Again, Steve supported me through this. There was always the art and poetry. There are always tears, happy moments that you learn from, and as long as you reach out for help, someone will be there. So here I am using new technology to tell my story, including Steve and everyone else along for the ride. It's difficult, don't give up. Life is too precious, even though the black dog has you in its grip. Just reach out, take risks, open your